Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so there's this date that's been really buzzing around online lately. It's popping up everywhere, blogs, social media, even some mainstream places are starting to talk about it.
Right.
We're talking about a new doomsday prediction. And the person right at the center of it all is a Japanese manga artist, Rio Tatsuki.
Yeah, some people are even calling her the Japanese Baba Vanga. Quite a comparison.
It really is. And her latest warning, it's incredibly specific. She's claiming a major natural disaster is going to strike on July 5th, 2025.
And not just the date, she's got a time too.
Exactly. 4:18 a.m., she says. And what's kind of wild is that people are actually starting to pay attention, across East Asia.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's spreading globally now, too.
Yeah, it's gaining traction. So I think our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack these claims.
Right.
We want to guide you through all the information, look at it using reason, history, some actual evidence.
Try and separate the fear from the facts.
Exactly. See what's genuinely going on. Separate that fear from, verifiable truth. It's kind of a journey into how this stuff spreads and why we choose to believe certain things, maybe.
And it feels especially relevant right now, doesn't it? I mean, with all the actual seismic activity happening in Japan recently.
That's a really good point.
For some people, those real-world shakes, those jitters, they probably just add fuel to the fire, making a specific prediction feel, I don't know, more potent.
It makes sense. It connects the abstract fear to something tangible.
So let's start with Rio Tatsuki herself. Who is she exactly? Where do these claims come from?
Okay, so Rio Tatsuki, she's primarily known as a manga artist. Her key work in this context is a series called The Future I Saw.
The Future I Saw, okay.
Yeah, and it's basically a collection of her drawings and, diary entries. She claims they're based on dreams and visions she has.
So she believes they're prophetic dreams.
That's the claim, yes, that these are prophetic.
And I guess that's why she has this following, right? Her fans point to things they say she predicted.
Exactly. They claim she made some pretty uncanny predictions. For instance, they point to the devastating 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami.
Wow, okay. That was huge.
Huge. And they even say she predicted the COVID-19 outbreak.
Really? So what kind of impact is all this having now as we get closer to this July 2025 date?
Well, it's having tangible effects. You hear reports of people actually stocking up on emergency supplies.
Seriously?
Yeah. And some are apparently booking trips to get away from coastal areas in Japan around that date. Others are just kind of, mentally bracing themselves.
They're preparing emotionally.
Right. And her latest prediction, the one for 2025, it's really vivid. She describes things like cities sinking. Sinking. Oceans boiling. Giant bubbles coming out of the sea, and a mega tsunami that she says will be far worse than Tohoku in 2011.
That sounds apocalyptic.
Yeah, it does. But it's really important to state here that scientists overwhelmingly look at this specific imagery and just dismiss it as pure fantasy.
Okay, so the scientific community isn't buying the boiling oceans.
Not at all. And what's really interesting when you dig into these predictions is how they seem to gain traction. If you look critically at the so-called evidence, you often run into this thing called the predictions made after an event fallacy. It's basically retrofitting.
Retrofitting, explain that.
Okay, so you have these vague drawings or maybe some ambiguous statements from her manga or diary. After a big event happens, people look back and say, oh, that drawing must have meant this specific event. They reinterpret the vague stuff to fit the real thing after it's already happened.
I see. It's like reading your horoscope at the end of the day and going, wow, that perfectly described my terrible commute, even though it just said, expect minor travel delays.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. You make it fit after the fact.
So looking back at her past predictions, like maybe a drawing of someone wearing a mask or waves hitting a city, before COVID or before Tohoku, those could have meant almost anything, couldn't they?
Absolutely. They're incredibly open-ended beforehand. A person in a mask could be pollution, surgery, a festival. Waves hitting a city could be any storm, anywhere. It only looks specific in hindsight.
That sounds an awful lot like Nostradamus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His writings were so cryptic, people are still arguing about what they meant centuries later, fitting them to events after they happened.
That's a great parallel. Nostradamus is the classic example. The language is so symbolic and vague, you can bend it to fit almost any major historical event after it occurs. The real test, the scientific test, is predicting something before it happens, with enough specific detail that it can actually be verified or falsified.
Which brings up a really important question, I think. If anyone, could truly predict disasters with this kind of precision, I mean, down to the exact minute.
Yeah.
Why aren't governments lining up to work with them? Why isn't the scientific community, which is always looking for better prediction methods, testing these abilities under controlled conditions?
That really cuts to the heart of it.
What would that even look like scientifically?
Well, that's the core issue, right? In science, if you make a claim, especially an extraordinary one like predicting the future, it needs to be testable, repeatable.
Okay.
So a claim of supernatural foresight, especially one this specific, would need rigorous testing. You'd try to replicate it, see if the predictions actually hold up under controlled observation time after time.
And has that happened here?
No. There's a complete lack, a total absence of any peer-reviewed studies, any successful replication of these kinds of abilities. And this really highlights the difference between pseudoscience and actual scientific forecasting.
How so?
In pseudoscience, if a prediction fails, and they often do, it gets excused or reinterpreted. Oh, maybe the timing was slightly off, or maybe she meant a symbolic disaster, not a literal one. The goalposts keep moving.
Right. You adjust the story to fit the outcome.
Exactly. But in science, if a forecast is wrong, it's just wrong. You learn from it, you adjust your models, but the prediction failed. That's how scientific understanding actually moves forward.
So, okay, let's talk about the actual science for July 5th, 2025. What are the experts, seismologists, meteorologists, astronomers saying? Is there any scientific reason at all to think a catastrophe is coming on that specific date?
Absolutely zero. None whatsoever.
Zero.
Zero. There are no official alerts being issued by seismologists about unusual global activity for that day. Meteorologists aren't forecasting anything globally catastrophic. Astronomers aren't warning about, rogue asteroids hitting then, or massive solar storms, or weird planetary alignments causing chaos.
So no giant bubbles predicted by NASA.
Definitely no giant bubbles. There's simply no known predicted abnormal tectonic activity or atmospheric or cosmic event aligning with some catastrophe on that specific date. From a scientific perspective, July 5th, 2025 looks like just another day on the calendar.
Okay. But speaking of, real seismic activity, let's shift focus to something that is actually happening in Japan right now.
Okay.
There's this remote chain of islands way down south, the Takara Islands. They've been experiencing what the local media is calling a seismic storm.
Yeah, I saw reports on that.
The Japan Meteorological Agency, the JMA, they recorded over 470 earthquakes there in just a few days leading up to Thursday morning.
Wow, 470. That's a lot.
It is. Now, to be clear, most were tiny. Barely felt, probably. But two stood out. Magnitude 5.1 quakes, one on Sunday, one on Tuesday.
5.1. Okay, you definitely feel those.
Oh, yeah. Strong enough to rattle the dishes, swing the lights. But thankfully, no major damage reported.
That's good news.
Yeah.
But it's a perfect example of how real current events can feed into these broader anxieties, right?
Totally.
The JMA has told residents there to stay alert because that area does have historical periods of increased seismic activity. And the volcanologist Hayashi Yoko has also noted that, a stronger quake, maybe magnitude 6 or higher, is still possible there. It's a known risk.
And this is the first time for the Takara Islands recently, is it?
No, you're right. They had a similar swarm back in September 2023. Something like 346 earthquakes in just 15 days then. These islands are pretty interesting too. Only 7 of the 12 are actually inhabited, about 700 residents total. Some have active volcanoes. And they're really hard to get to just ferries twice a week, and only if the weather's good. So it's a very isolated, geologically active spot.
And zooming out from just those islands, Japan as a whole is, it's earthquake country.
Absolutely. It sits right at the junction of 4 major tectonic plates.
4 plates?
Yeah, which makes it one of the most seismically active places on Earth. They experience something like 1,500 tremors a year. That's about 18% of all the world's earthquakes happening right there.
Wow, 18%. So earthquakes are just a part of life there.
It's a constant reality. And the government knows the risks, obviously. Just recently, a government panel put out a report stating there's something like a 16 to 18% chance of a megaquake, we're talking magnitude 7.0 or greater, hitting central Japan within the next 30 years.
16 to 18% in 30 years. That's significant.
It is. Their Earthquake Research Committee identified 23 specific fault zones under the Sea of Japan that could trigger something like that. The highest risk, they said, about 4–6%, is concentrated in 9 faults off the northern coast of the Kinki region.
So those are the kinds of predictions scientists do make based on geology, data, probabilities over time.
Exactly. Based on evidence and models, not dreams.
So given all this real ongoing seismic activity and these official warnings about long-term risks, Maybe it's not so surprising that even though scientists dismiss Tatsuki's prediction as fantasy, people online are still drawing connections, connecting these real quakes to her very specific July 5th, 2025 prophecy. It's like the real shaking makes the prediction feel more possible, maybe.
It absolutely fuels it. It provides confirmation bias fodder. And this fear, this anxiety generated by these predictions, it's not just, an abstract feeling. It can have real psychological consequences and practical ones, too.
How so?
Well, widespread anxiety and panic can lead people to make really damaging, irrational decisions. Think about the 2012 Mayan calendar scare.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
People quit their jobs, spent their life savings, isolated themselves from family, all based on a prediction that never came true. That fear can cause more real-world harm than the imagined threat itself.
That brings up a deeper question, doesn't it? Why do we, as humans, seem so drawn to these doomsday predictions? There seems to be this inherent desire to believe in them sometimes.
It's just a fascinating psychological phenomenon.
It almost feels like it offers a weird sense of control, maybe, in a world that feels chaotic. Having a specific end date, even a scary one, paradoxically gives a sense of order.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. It puts a boundary on the unknown, right? A finality to all the overwhelming uncertainty we face. It's kind of a grim comfort, a way to simplify things.
Like cognitive simplification.
Exactly. Think about it. We're grappling with incredibly complex, often scary realities like climate change, economic instability, wars.
Yeah, big, messy problems with no easy answers.
Right. So a clear, definitive end, like a predicted apocalypse, can almost feel like closure. It simplifies everything down to one final event. It taps into that deep human need to find meaning and patterns, even if we have to rely on supernatural beliefs instead of, evidence.
It's maybe easier to believe in a single preordained ending than to face the ongoing, messy work of tackling those real-world challenges day after day.
I think that's a big part of it. And this is where that stark contrast between superstition and science comes in again.
Right.
Real disasters happen, earthquakes, storms, tsunamis, but they happen without magical foresight. The warnings, the real signs are found in scientific data, in measurable trends, not in someone's dream journal.
Science actually gives us tools to understand and prepare, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Geologists monitoring fault lines, satellites tracking weather, ocean sensors detecting tsunamis.
Exactly. It empowers us to mitigate risks, to build resilience, rather than just sitting and waiting in fear for a specific date on a calendar.
So as we look towards July 5th, 2025, the most likely outcome, based on everything we know, is that it'll probably just come and go, like any other day.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a storm somewhere, or a small earthquake happens somewhere else in the world. Because, like we said, those things happen all the time, every day.
That's the overwhelmingly likely scenario, which really reinforces, I think, a vital call to action for all of us listening.
It is.
Stay grounded. Stick to reliable information sources. Listen to the actual experts in seismology, meteorology, geology, and just remember how many times throughout history the world was supposed to end and didn't.
Yeah, the list of failed doomsday predictions is pretty long.
It's very long. History is littered with them.
So maybe for a final thought, something for you listening to chew on. Instead of pouring our energy and anxiety into specific prophecies and dates, maybe we should challenge ourselves to focus that energy on the real present-day challenges that we know are facts. Things like poverty, inequality, the actual measurable impacts of climate change.
Those aren't predictions. They're here and now.
Exactly. They are observable realities that demand our attention, our responsibility, and our action right now. If you live in an earthquake zone, be prepared. Have a kit, have a plan. Base it on the real science of your area.
Makes sense.
If you live near the coast, understand the actual risks of storm surges or tsunamis and know what the evacuation routes are. Use the knowledge we have.
Be prepared based on reality, not fantasy.
Right. But don't live your life in fear of a specific number on a calendar or a time scribbled in a manga. Use your reason, engage with the world, and remember, the future isn't some script that's already written.
It's something we're all creating together every single day.
Exactly. We create it through our choices and our actions.